Recall is one of the most important skills that your dog can and should have, but sometimes it can feel like your dog just simply isn't getting it, even if you think that you're doing your best in training, and you definitely are. But this can usually be attributed to just a handful of reasons. So let's go over the reasons why your dog might not be listening to recall and how you can address each possible reasoning. The first reason, and a reason I see a lot, is that he just isn't getting rewarded enough or at all, or he isn't rewarded well enough. This is probably the biggest thing for most dogs and their owners. The first part of this is that even if your dog seems like he's nailed the concept of coming when called and he crushes recall, it doesn't mean that your dog should never be rewarded for doing that skill. Of course, we can't always have treats on us, and especially when it comes to a skill like recall, there's a lot of cases when we don't know if we're gonna need it when we're out, so we might not have treats on us. So it's not like you have to reward your dog every single time after he's learned this command pretty well, but you should aim to have some sort of a lottery system in rewarding dogs. And actually, I also read in a really interesting book I read recently called Don't Shoot the Dog, really good dog training book, where it said that the lottery system is actually probably the most reliable way to reward a dog after they've learned a command. And that's because they just don't know if they're gonna get a treat or not, so they will do the best they can every single time, of course, after they've mastered the command in the first place. So bringing it back to recall, this should mean that even if you don't have treats every single time to reward your dog, even if your dog is amazing at recall, definitely randomly reward them when they do it every few times. By phasing it out entirely, it's no wonder that your dog won't listen to it anymore. So definitely incorporate that random reward system. On the other hand, we also have the possibility that the dog isn't being rewarded well enough in his eyes. For example, you might be rewarding your dog with, kibble treats, which needless to say is not going to be high value for most dogs. I mean, some dogs it is, but most dogs that's not considered very high value. So if they're just getting rewarded with those kind of treats, they won't feel motivated enough to do this command. Another example though is that you might be feeding your dog chicken, for example, when they listen to recall, which you might think, and fair enough, that chicken is the best or one of the best rewards for a dog when they listen to something. But the interesting thing is that high value treats doesn't apply to every single dog the same way. For example, my dog Mochi, one of his high value rewards would be like frozen green beans, which you wouldn't think for a lot of other dogs. Also in his eyes, a very high value reward would be just like me throwing a pile of leaves at him. I don't know why, he just gets really excited and that's like a reward. So high value treats does not necessarily mean meat or does not necessarily mean cheese or something like that. You have to figure out what your dog wants to work for. Thankfully, I already made a whole entire video on how to find your dog's individual high value treat, and I'll link that in the description so you can check that out. Second possible reason why your dog might not be getting recall or listening to recall as well is because he realizes that it's not mandatory. The fix to this is actually quite simple, and you could either change the command word if you're in too deep and you think it's hopeless to keep going the way you are, or just make your requirements more clear. So if we go a little bit deeper into this issue, the problem is that in the past you might have called your dog, come, and he hasn't listened, and he realized that there was no punishments for that. Of course, hold up, this is not me saying punish your dog for not coming. We definitely don't do that on this channel, nor should any dog owner who wants to train their dog in the most ethical and scientifically proven most effective way. But what this does mean is that you shouldn't be calling your dog when you think your dog has like a pretty significant chance of them not listening. And also going off of that, if you do call your dog and he doesn't listen and you didn't expect this, just go up to him and leash him if that's the goal or whatever, but don't keep calling them and letting them keep not listening. So instead, to work on this recall issue, only call your dog when you're pretty sure he's gonna listen. And while your dog still isn't reliable with this, keep them on a long leash. And by the way, this is not to say that if they're on a leash and you call them and they don't listen, to pop the leash or something. You can obviously pull them a little bit gently towards you to kind of indicate it. The leash serves more as an insurance. So like your dog shouldn't be off leash anyway if they don't have recall in an area that isn't fenced in. Basically, you just don't want to practice recall in situations where they won't listen, because then they're going to start to realize, oh, if I don't listen, who cares? If you think this is your case and maybe you think you're too far down the path, it's too far gone, then easy fix, just change the recall word. For example, you might be saying come right now, you could say here, you could say whatever you want, honestly. You could be like emergency or whatever you want to say, but change the word entirely, because then in your dog's mind it's an entirely new command, so you can start from scratch. Third reason that your dog's recall maybe not be clicking is that you just don't practice it often enough. So I can talk about a personal experience here. Mochi, I would say at like 1 year old, was perfection at recall. Every time I said come, he would come. He He was past his teenage phase. It was all going smoothly. Then we went on a 1 month like vacation kind of to my boyfriend's parents' home, and Mochi had a lot of freedom there because they live in a very rural area. To be honest, it kind of slipped my mind to keep training. We were just having so much fun going on hikes and all that kind of stuff. We didn't need to use recall that often because there's so many acres of land that he could run around and stay close, and it was no issue. But when we came back home, it was an issue because I realized that when I said come, Mochi would only listen maybe 85 to 90% of the time, which is still obviously really good, but it's not as good as we needed to be safe off leash. So this is when I realized, and I think we all know this, that not training for like weeks on weeks on end is definitely not good for any command, but especially something so important like recall. So to fix this issue, just keep practicing at least, I would say, twice or 3 times a week. Even on your walks, if you take them on a long leash, you could do it on your leashed walks. Just say come, reward them when they do, etc. But just don't forget to keep practicing even when you think your dog is perfect at recall. And fourthly, this is a very similar tip that comes from the same experience of that 1 month I was gone, is that your dog is too used to too much freedom. So again, with Mochi, he was going off leash walks 3 times a day, 1 hour each time, walking through forests and like farm-like areas off leash, and he was having so much fun, and we were so happy that he was able to have so much freedom. But there is consequences to not walking your dog on a leash at least a few times per week or every 2 weeks. Of course, if you're gonna live forever in an area where you have like 50 acres of free land, maybe you can walk off leash for the rest of your life, but for most of us, that's not the case. And it's really important that your dog learns to stay close even when they're off leash, because the more freedom they get, the further they roam and the less they feel inclined to listen. So easy fix again, just do like even a 5-minute leashed walk around the neighborhood, even if you do have the opportunity to be off leash all the time, because being on a leash and teaching your dog to loose leash walk will teach them just to stay closer and that you should still be the center of attention even when you're outside. This inherently gets their recall better as well. The 5th and final reason that your dog's recall may not be clicking or as good as you would hope is because he doesn't practice around real world distractions. This is definitely one of the biggest major reasons why a dog's recall can't be considered perfect, and that's because a lot of dogs can listen to recall amazingly if there's no real distractions, but as soon as a deer runs by or as soon as a fun-looking dog is in the distance, your dog forgets what come even means. So simple solution is to practice around these distractions, starting at a really low intensity and moving it up and up and up very slowly but surely. So for example, let's say your dog is distracted by other dogs. Find an area where you can see dogs in the distance, hopefully pretty far, but still like in eyesight. Let your dog look at the dog, get used to the environment, get distracted, and practice come there. And again, increase the distance as much as possible where your dog can still see them so that the standards are quite low. Chances are if your dog sees a dog in the very, very distance, he's still not gonna be that distracted and can still listen to you. Then when they listen, reward them heavily. Again, high value treats, more amount than you might usually reward them. As your dog gets better, move a little bit closer and closer, and that just reinforces that your dog has to listen to you even around distractions. And it also helps them see that you will provide more value to them, such as, the high value treat, than if they were to run off and not listen to you and go play with that dog or go chase that deer or something like that. Actually, I lied. That was not the last reason. I have one more reason why your dog's recall is maybe not good. And this is arguably the most important and relevant one for a lot of dogs. And that's that they're getting accidentally punished for listening to recall. So this is something I see all the time. I don't go to dog parks anymore. Long story, but when I used to go to dog parks, I saw all the time owners saying their recall cue to their dog, come. Their dog comes to them, and then the dog gets leashed up and they leave the park. So in their owner's eyes, obviously it's super useful to use come and recall in this situation, but in the dog's eyes, they're seeing, okay, mom says come, I go to her, then I get leashed up and I leave all my friends and leave the dog park and the fun all ends. So what's the solution to this to make sure you're not accidentally punishing them? The first part of the solution would be to just practice recall all the time with high value treats and then not leash them up and leave the situation immediately, but rather, for example, go to a dog park, say come, give them the high value treat, then let them keep playing again, do it again, etc. The second part to this is that when you do have to punish them in their eyes, for example, leashing them up and leaving a park or something, just go up to your dog, leash them up without saying anything and leave, instead of tainting the recall word. Of course, in the future, when your dog gets really good at recall, realizes it's not always a negative thing, you can use it once in a while to, get them to come back to you before you leave the dog park. But especially at the beginning of your dog's recall education journey, you definitely don't want to risk having any negative connotation to this word in your dog's mind. And now that you know the potential reasons why your dog's recall is maybe not as good as you would hope, check out the video links here on the screen to find out how to take your dog's recall from okay to perfect.